Pagbabago Duterte.
I, Rodrigo Roa Duterte,
Your concern is human rights. Mine is human life. Shoot them dead.
order bago ni Mayor. Di lang daw mo patyon. Kung silo na mo bisong, wala na yung bisong, wala na may silbi.
Mahirap kayo. Magtiis kayo sa hirap at gutom. Wala akong pakialam.
Parang alipin po tayo ng China. Parang wala tayong karapatan sa sarili natin. Sakupan.
I just simply love Xi Jinping. He understood, he understands my problem, and is willing to help. And I'd like to say thank you, China. Ikaw, ABS-CBN, I will see to it that you're out.
There's nothing really to be extra scared of that coronavirus thing.
We were excellent. Na-control po natin ang pagkalat ng sakit.
The Philippines' total COVID-19 caseload reaches 1 million Monday, as the Health Department logs 8,929 new confirmed infections.
Maliit na bagay ito sa buhay natin. Marami tayong dinaanan, mas grabe, mas mahirap, mas na magluluha kayo. Gusto ko nang umiyak sa harap ninyo.
Hindi lahat may ayuda, hindi lahat nakakuha ng sapat na ayuda. Gutom yung mga Pilipino and kailangan natin magkaroon ng action.
Wala lang isip yung mga gagawin yan. What they just do is just to show to the people that they care, but they do not really care because of their ignorance.
Dapat hindi masamain ng gobyerno dahil tumutulong na nga sila eh. Tapos binibigyan pa nila ng ibang kahulugan.
Pagbulag ka na, no? Hindi mo na di-differentiate ang liwanag sa dilim.
Hi guys, I'm Pin, and you are watching Rappler. A little under a year from now, we are going to make a decision that will dictate where the Philippines goes. A lot is at stake in the 2022 presidential elections, and on Rappler, our message is clear. We want us actually, the voter, to be the hero in the story. Back in 2016, throwback muna tayo, our hashtag for the elections was hashtag the leader I want. This time, we want to highlight you, the voter, in the 2022 elections. Hashtag We Decide, Atin ang Pilipinas highlights our duty to reclaim our country. We believe and we know that we can reclaim our nation by voting. And what better way to prepare for 2022 than by learning, educating, and asking questions? Welcome to PH Vote Dialogues. This series of dialogues is led by Move PH, Rappler's civic engagement arm. Today's episode is co-hosted by Holy Angel University, HAU's Communicators League, Global Shapers Iloilo Hub, U-Vote, the University of Caloocan City Communication students, and TNC of the North. We are also live on Facebook and cross-posted to Move PH's partner social media pages. Now you know Dakila in Defense of Human Rights and Dignity Movement, Human Rights Online Philippines, Caloocan Young Leaders Initiative, and Boris Youth Leadership Institute. Hello, if we're from wherever you're watching from. So anyway, simple lang yung goal natin dito. We bring together veteran journalists, experts, Rappler's own editorial team, thought leaders from different fields, and you, our dear viewer, wherever it is that you're watching from, whether you're in the Zoom, whether you're watching from Facebook, YouTube, wherever, or you're watching this as a replay after we go live, because we want to understand each other better. Budget season is in full swing. Rappler's own editorial team, it's the last one under President Rodrigo Duterte, and it's being passed less than a year before the 2022 presidential elections that will determine his successor. The power of the purse, this is but one of many tasks the branch of government we'll be talking about today must fulfill. So how is a budget passed? How does a law pass? And why in the world are certain legislation turned into law? Bakit nga ba? Paano nangyari yun? We will be discussing that today. Joining me tonight is Dr. Edna Ko. She's the former Dean of the University of the Philippines Diliman National College of Public Administration and Governance and the Philippine Center for Investigative Journalism Executive Editor, my former colleague Carmela Fonbena. Good evening, ladies. Thank you for joining us today. Mahaba-habang usapan to. But thank you for indulging us. Thank you for clearing out your time for this discussion. Let's begin with something more personal. Your first memory of Philippine Congress, or kahit hindi pala first, kahit a memory of Philippine Congress that stands out. Ma'am Edna, may event ba sa House or sa Senate na siguro parang anchor memory for you?
All right. There are a number actually, Bea. To tell my age and of course my read on the history of the legislature, I remember and I recall from our political science and history books about all lawmakers wearing all white. And you know what the white stands for? Which is the color of public administration. It's purity, it is accountability, and genuine service. Ang ganda, di ba? Fast forward to now, what would be a very eventful memory that I have of Congress? On a more positive thing, I thought the late Noy Aquino, former president, it struck me that among Philippine presidents during the State of the Nation address, he would communicate, this is for comm students, he would communicate in genuine, in very adorable Filipino language. The only president I knew who would address the SONA, the public, in Filipino. At saka, despite being an Atenista, he would address it, he would deliver the talk, the SONA, in perfect Filipino. I thought, wow, what a good leader communicator, right? Hindi ko napansin yan sa iba pang presidente na nag-deliver ng State of the Nation address. In the more recently, what struck me as a memory, it dropped like a bombshell in the gallery of Congress. Bigla, there was a change of the Speaker of the House from Alvarez to GMA, if you remember that. And people were just looking around and wondering, how could this happen? How did it happen? And so that's a big question mark. So these are so far among the, the most memorable, striking, good, bad, shocking And I thought that's it. But of course, those are those that were captured by public media, those that we heard, that those we have seen, but we didn't really go deep into what these guys in the August Hall are doing on a daily basis. That's, I think, the question that we're going to dissect today.
Yeah. Thank you for refresh kasi parang a lot of things have happened no in Philippine Congress. Parang oo nga. Even I think the most veteran reporters from the House were kind of also confused during that the mess of the Alvarez ouster, which is a perfect segue to Carmela Fontena. Syempre may alam na ako sa sagot ni Carmela dito. Pero Carmela, can you take us back to when did you begin covering Philippine Congress?
Hi, Bea. Good evening, Dr. Ko. I'm happy to be here. Ako naman, I'd like to reminisce a little bit about my younger years as a reporter. No? Because some people may know me more for my stories on the security sector, siguro the military, the West Philippine Sea, and the Marawi Siege, of course. But before that, I was a political reporter covering the Legislative Chamber, the Senate, and the House of Representatives. And I always say this, everything I know about politics in the Philippines, I learned from covering the House of Representatives and the Senate. So I was a congressional beat reporter during the Arroyo presidency. The Senate then, I remember, was also busy at the time, the Blue Ribbon Committee in particular, just like now, investigating corruption allegations against President Arroyo and her husband. And one of the corruption scandals, yung malaki na kino-cover namin dati, was the contract with Chinese company ZTE Corporation over the country's national broadband network. Right. So this investigation eventually led to the ouster of Jose de Venecia as Speaker of the House of Representatives. He was a loyal ally of Arroyo, but his son happened to be the losing bidder to that project. And then he testified against the administration. So in the middle of these investigations in the Senate, which I covered, I found myself in the Batasang Pambansa, waiting for the vote, whether they'd oust the Venecia or not. Because the question then was whether or not congressmen were loyal to Arroyo, or were they loyal to the Venecia? Well, as we have come to know now, syempre, the president always wins in the House, diba? But I still find it funny kasi I told nga, Bea, whenever I remembered it, because there were, I think, over 200 congressmen noon. Ngayon, mga over 300 na, diba? And they were taking turns on the podium explaining their votes. Parang, syempre, parang betrayal of the Venecia siya eh. It was a very emotional time at the plenary. Ako naman, as a newbie reporter, I didn't know them. Tapos I couldn't tell who was speaking. And I had to rely on the generosity of fellow reporters to tell me, sino yung nagsasalita? Party list yan, or congressman yan dito, congressman doon, and their backgrounds, which political party they belong to, mga ganyan. These are important information you should know as a reporter. Eh. But yeah, that was funny. But it was also an early lesson for me kasi on power play in Philippine politics and in the legislative chamber in particular. And we'll talk more about that. So again, no, everything I know, I learned from the lawmakers. So it's an exciting beat. I always say if you want to be a good, syempre biased ako, no? If you want to be a good political reporter, it's good to start in the House and in the Senate.
It's funny that you kasi naalala ko, I think that was what you told me also kasi. So I'm gonna talk a little bit about me, but I covered the House briefly for a while for Rappler. And I think at the height of my confusion, kasi mahirap talaga siya guys kung wala kang alam beforehand, like when you go in there, tas yung kilala mo lang siguro a handful of congressmen, it's very daunting. And then I think Carmela, one of the ways that she motivated me, or at least pushed me further para hindi ako mag-give up. Like she kept telling me that everything I know about Philippine politics I learned from Congress and the House. And true enough, ang dami ko ang natutunan for better or worse. No? Okay, so we were actually talking offline, the three of us, yesterday about today's discussion. So like while we were talking about Philippine Congress, diba, parang it's admittedly a very complicated, a huge branch of government, diba, aside from you have the internal politics there, personal politics also between the members of Congress. So siguro let's go back po to basics, no? Ano nga ba ang ginagawa ng isang mambabatas? Kasi no, I think sometimes yung definitions nalalost in translation because also, di ba, parang hindi tayo tutok parati sa ginagawa ng isang mambabatas. So ano po ba dapat ang trabaho ng isang mambabatas? So your Ma'am Edna can go first.
Well, first, let's look at it this way, no? By textbook definition of mambabatas, actually in the context of the Philippines, dalawang layers yung mambabatas. Actually, three. At the national level, you have the House of Representatives or Congress, as we generically refer to it. Tapos the other one is the Senate, no? If you will ask, anong kaibahan nila? Pareho silang gumagawa ng batas, no? Pero anong klaseng batas? I mean, there is a difference actually. But in both cases, merong elemento sila na the mambabatas is a fiscalizer, one who check the mate, no? Checkmate. Sino chine-check? The executive. Nagfi-fiscalize sila na anything that the executive branch does. I mentioned earlier, the third mambabatas at the local level. May mambabatas din sa local government level. This is the sanggunian. This is the council. They make laws which are related to local laws, naming of street, penalty of throwing basura on the river, in the bridge. Bawal ang tricycle to ply the highways. These are the batas at the local level. So in that sense, tatlo yung klase. May sanggunian at the local, there is a House of Representatives, and there is the Senate. Yung dalawa are considered national legislators because their concerns are national, no? Although may mga nagpaka-local na mga congressmen, like balitan ang pangalan ng kalye ng kanilang sa may bahay nila to named after a grandfather or whatever, that's being brought in the Congress. But I think the key difference between Senate and the House, although both, as I said, can checkmate, can fiscalize. When we say fiscalize, basically nasa nature ng mambabatas, i-question yung ginagawa ng executive, yung pinasang mga panukala, at saka scrutinizing the budget which emanates from executive. Nanggagaling sa executive yung consolidated budget ng bansa, and then they pass it over to House of Representatives, and this is part of the job of Congress. And then it goes also to the Senate. So what we are witnessing now is a natural function of the Senate, scrutinizing over the books of accounts, over how the money of the country is spent, and whether this has been put to good use. So that's fiscalizing, checking, asking, the harsh questions, so to speak. Pero over time, nagbago yun eh. Parang, bakit hindi na nag-fiscalize? Ay, bakit naka-ally? Aligned na siya, di ba? It looks like that way now. But the other function is for international law, for review of treaties, nasa kamay ng Senado yan eh. That's why, if you will notice, West Philippine Sea, access to the West Philippine Sea, ang lakas ng voice, ng noise galing sa Senado. Sa Congress, it's primarily, as I said, the budget scrutiny emanates from there, and then it's forwarded to the Senate. All right. But the hard assessment on the budget, and therefore on accountability, is with the Congress. What else? Yung pagpapasa ng mga batas which are indicated only by the Constitution. The Constitution cannot flesh out details of the law, no? Nag-express lang siya ng spirit of the law, but it cannot flesh out in details. Now, it is Congress that picks it up in greater detail, at yun yung nagiging Republic Act. Yun yung nagiging bills, dinideliberate, pinag-uusapan, hanggang maipasa sa House of Reps, and then it also is put up to Senate. Usually may counterpart yung mga yan, And the way they do it is through the working committees. May kanya-kanyang committee, no? So if it is like yung science and technology related, it goes to the Committee on Science and Technology, and then there is a counterpart committee of that committee in the Senate. And then the two at a certain point comes together in what we call the bilateral, the bicameral session. Pag nag-agree sila, fine. It is passed on to the president for affirmation that it becomes a law. So, I mean, the nitty-gritty, kaya nga dapat mapag-aral, mapag-scrutinize si congressman at saka si senador. Napaka-advantageous na alam nila kung ano ang existing laws before they sponsor. And so you don't waste your time repeating what is there already. Ano pa yung isang ginagawa? Amendment of existing laws. Outdated, kailangan ng i-review, baguhin. It's another function of the legislative. So basically, that's the lawmaking. Pick up and should not go against the spirit of the Constitution. Budgetary concerns of the country. Raising questions the hard way. Amending the laws that are existing that need to be updated. Naming streets, kasama na sa Kongreso yan. What else? Generally, it's that. But it's in all field. Infrastructure, budget, science and technology, education, health, social welfare. Kaya lahat yan dumadaan sa Kongreso. The bahaginan, kasi social welfare. So it's very crucial. It's very important. But the work is mind-boggling. So kung hindi ka masipag mag-aral, wag ka na lang dyan. Diba? Hindi ka maging critical, wag ka na lang dyan. And that's why they have also a slew of staff who are technical, who are lawmakers by themselves. Kasi si Congresswoman, pwedeng hindi naman siya adept on lawmaking, pero meron siyang lawyer, no? Na bit-bit kasama sa staff niya. So I think in short, but that's already long, ang dami at napakahalaga. Legislative checks the executive.
Yeah.
Basically. It fiscalizes.
I think
yung overview ni ma'am reminds me of why I was very afraid of taking over the house for Rappler. Carmela, nabanggit nga, di ba? Parang ang daming moving parts, ang daming nangyayari.
I think I want to add also to what Dr. Ko said. Gusto ko lang i-emphasize, no, yung sometimes we forget na yung legislative chamber talaga is a co-equal branch of the executive and the judiciary, and that's the key. That's very important. There's a lot of maraming functions ang Congress, no, but that is key. All these three branches, executive, legislative, judiciary, they're very powerful by design. And they're powerful enough that each branch should be able to balance, sabi nga ni Dr. Ko, fiscalize each other, di ba? Counter or correct the other branches. If there are branches that, commit mistakes or are not doing their jobs. Si Dr. Ko already mentioned yung lawmaking powers ng Congress, no? And other than, renaming streets, which they like to do, we should, alam naman natin how important lawmaking is because it affects our lives. So, whether or not contraceptives are made available in health centers, there are laws about that. Whether or not divorce will be allowed in the country, that will be deliberated. And they will have to pass a law on that. How much we should pay in taxes, the law decides that. How much money goes to government departments, the law decides that also. So ito yung sinasabi ni Dr. Ko na power of the purse ng legislative department. Kasi they will decide if the money goes to social services, infrastructure, or to military modernization. But other than making laws, madami pang powers yung legislative. And we're seeing that doon sa Blue Ribbon ngayon na, the way it is investigating the government spending during the pandemic. Ito yung oversight function niya. Other than that, I think we'll discuss that more later. They also constitute the Commission on Appointments, diba? Which vets appointees of the executive. That's very powerful. they're also members of the Electoral Tribunal, along with members of the Supreme Court, and they decide on electoral protests. They can also change the constitution by a vote of 3/4 vote of Congress. So they're very powerful that way. Tapos, they can also declare national emergencies, and we saw that during the Marawi siege. They supported the declaration of martial law in Mindanao. So yun, I think ang dami talaga nilang power, and sometimes hindi lang natin sila nakikita na that powerful when they, follow the direction of the executive branch too much. But it's really powerful, and Dr. Ko has started discussing na rin differences of the Senate and the House of Representatives.
We'll be talking a little bit more about the interactions and the dynamics between the executive and the legislative branches of government in a bit. But I just want to touch on something that Dr. Ko was mentioning yesterday also about how the House and the Senate are political. Ano pong ibig sabihin nun when you say that it's political? Kasi parang isipin ng mga tao, bakit? Parang political din naman yung Malacanang, political din naman yung Pangulo. Pero anong what do you mean when you say that Congress is a political institution?
Well, actually, I'll begin with there are two types of people in the bureaucracy, in the government. Government yan di ba? Merong tinatawag na career people. Hindi sila ine-elect. They are appointed or taken in. They can apply, open application. They can be scrutinized, taken in eventually to be in government, to serve on the basis of what? Their technical qualification, their ability, the degree that they have. And usually ito, nasa oversight siya, ng hawak-hawak siya na by the Civil Service Commission. No? So this is the bulk of the people in the bureaucracy in government. Maraming tao na nasa career category. Pero meron din tinatawag na non-career. At ito yung ini-elect, binoboto ng open election ng bayan. Kaya grade 6 ka or high school ka, pero pag nanalo ka, you don't need a PhD, a masteral degree. Pero in that sense, we trust you. We want you to serve. We authorize you, the people's choice, in other words. And that makes it a political authorization. No? So, in that sense, etong si congressman, si senator, meron din naman na on the other hand, non-career pero napakahusay naman nila. No? So you can look at some of the qualifications, the background, the educational training, the skills. Pwedeng career sila. Pero binoto sila ng tao, yun yung isang section ng mga nag-o-occupy ng tao sa gobyerno natin. So when people generally make a judgment of us, of me, and people say, yung nasa gobyerno, corrupt, kasi mga politiko yan. Excuse me, I am not a politiko. I don't occupy this public position in a state university because I was publicly voted. No? So may kaibahan. And in that sense, going to your question, may mga tao na sa gobyerno na inihalal, ibinoto ng tao, and by virtue of that election, because we have to connect it to our election this time, no? Inauthorize sila ng tao. And in our democratic constitution, the people's voice and the people's choice is supreme. The way our constitution is constructed is we have that, no? So itong mga legislators, these are politically chosen. It is the will and the choice of people. It is not because they all have the qualifications to prepare themselves for that. Not all, pero meron din, diba? I would mention our colleague Stella Kimbo, who has a PhD in economics, summa cum laude. I mean, meron siyang dalawa, no? Meron siyang the proper training, the proper profession, but also nanalo siya eh, no? So kung hindi siya inilagay ng tao, which is a political decision, that's what I mean. Inilagay ng tao, binigyan ng authority ng mamamayan, that becomes a political decision. All right, it's a choice. Kaya mahirap din maliitin lang na yung naandyan, nakaupo, ay wala namang masyadong pinag-aralan, because that's exactly the spirit of democracy. Eh. Anyone can be voted for and can vote, right? So,
Yeah. And actually, yun po ata yung interesting.
The enormous power. Namin sinasabi pa ni Carmela, ang laki ng power, di ba? That makes them really political, and that can make them negotiate, transact, kasi ang laki ng poder ng ating mga legislators. When I am made to decide on whether to appoint B as a commissioner of the Civil Service Commission, it is in my hands. It is my power, and in that sense, yung decision niya is political. Siyempre, i-justify niya yung decision. But then, at the end of the day, who makes judgment? It's their number. The number can be political. So the nature of their authority is political. The authorization which put them in their position is political. And when something is political, it depends on the crowd. Ano ang judgment? Ano ang usapan? At paligay ko, naniniwala ako dito, it is my decision and my judgment. That is a political decision.
Pero syempre, may halo din yun na politics of their constituents, also personal politics, as we've seen in certain instances.
Yeah, politics na ako lang ang nakinabang. Meron din namang politics na nirepresenta ko yung aking constituents, na which is the spirit really of voting and spirit of democracy, no? You are there, kaya ka tinawag na si representative, kaya yan House of Representatives eh. Dapat laging nilang nasa likod ng isip, ano sinasabi ng representatives, ng nire-represent ko? But more often than not, nai-ignore na yon pag nakaupo, di ba? Nagiging personal choice and decision. Yung what is supposed to be, nagkonsulta ba ako dun sa mga constituents ko?
Carmela, nabanggit nga ni Ma'am, di ba, na parang kaya like what you were saying earlier, the power is immense because they're supposed to be our stand-ins in Congress, right? But ito na yung but in your experience, like how does it actually work? From covering several congresses, like how does representation happen when they legislate, when they negotiate behind the scenes, and on record ng Congress, kasi magkaiba din yun. Marami mga pinag-uusapan that don't actually make it to the official records of Congress. So what insights have you gained from covering Congress?
Yun nga, no, I think I will keep repeating this, na when I covered Congress, what I saw and I continue to see yung power of the executive, the president in particular, over the legislative branch, which is nga supposed to be co-equal. Obviously, this is not good for democracy, as if none of the crucial and urgent laws can be passed without first consulting the executive department first. Well, not always, but in many instances. And there's a reason the House has been called a rubber stamp. Well, the Senate has earned some reputation of independence, no? And we're seeing this play out right now with the ongoing investigation in the Senate. But overall, hindi nga encouraging. I think yung sinasabi ni Dr. Ko, no, na it frustrates also some lawmakers when we generally refer to politicians, as corrupt, they don't know what they're doing, because there are some politicians who are trying, their best, trying to help do good work in Congress. Pero yun nga, mas marami lang talaga ang sanay sa, I guess, lumang kalakaran, no, na they follow, as we and we always see this in the votes kasi na when they vote, they follow the executive, they don't follow the conscience of their constituents or what their constituents want. So I think it's also important to recognize lawmakers who stand out, who are pushing the envelope. I think there were Dr. Ko mentioned the laws passed in Congress before. No, there were good times. Remember the difficult work of passing the reproductive health law against a lot of people, a lot of parties opposed to it. That was such good work on the part of Congress, no? When they, ito yung sometimes ang sinasabi natin sa Kongreso, wala nang debate kasi they do that
That was
not on the floor, di ba, Dr. Ko?
Yeah.
They discuss that sila lang nag-uusap niyan. So minsan ang tawag nga natin diyan sarsuela because once they reach the plenary or the session hall, alam na nila kung ano yung botohan, no? But there were rare occasions such as the reproductive health law, no, when you saw real lawmaking on the floor of both the Senate and the House of Representatives. And actually we've seen a lot of good laws passed when, you know, when the heart is into it, when they have good motivations, no, kaya naman nila eh. But you know, the laws that we are seeing recently though, hindi siya ganun ka-encouraging.
Pero Carmela, let me defend the Congress a bit, ha. Yung sinasabi kasi natin na sila na yan, nag-uusap sila. Of course, they will talk among themselves.
That's part
because
of the legislative process, yes.
Oo. Nasa committee sila eh. So yung chair ng committee tatawag, yung mga members tatawagin niya, may meeting yan, may mga hearings. Yung hearings ng committee, binubukas naman nila yan sa mga tao, sa mga merong
I'm referring, Dr. Ko, kunyari, impeachment votes when you will just be surprised, you know, they will decide on not the regular bills, but you know, when there are very political decisions such as impeachment and other very political votes, you know that a lot of these things are debated closed door instead of on the floor of the Senate or the House of Representatives.
At kasi ang nature nga kasi nung kanyang demokrasya, I'm trying to explain, no? Ang nature nung kanyang demokrasya as a process, merong representation eh. So representation by membership, by committees. So pwedeng yung kayo nag-uusap, di ba? Kasi nga, yun yung committee, yun yung mga, meron din naman na pwede naman sila magkonsulta dun sa constituents nila. And that's why a couple of days in a week, they are free from congressional meeting and deliberation and session. They are supposed to be meeting up with their respective constituents. At magkonsulta, no? I mean, these two processes are there, pero madalas hindi, mas overriding yung sila bilang miyembro ng komite na lang ang nag-usap. Pero hardly, especially the past few administrations, nakapagkonsulta ba ito sa kanyang distrito, di ba? Sa District 4 ng Quezon City, sa District 2 ng Leyte, nakapagkonsulta ba ito? Kasi yun yung role nila as representatives. But sometimes varied yan. Merong nagkukonsulta, token, merong nagkukonsulta, lalo na ngayon sa pandemic, can you imagine how consultation and representation can be defined in very concrete terms, di ba? But the other trigger to that, parang bakit nawala yung independence ng legislative from the executive? I think that's an interest. Over the years, at the end of the day, may mga trading. May mga hindi naman negosyante at mga ngalakal, pero bakit nagte-trading? Ano ang agreement and exchanges maybe that they have come between them, that they have come together and agreed on. And this is where the transparency, accountability, dapat nga may reporting sa mamamayan. But you know, I realize, sa textbook lang yan. But in reality, there are many intervening factors kung bakit nadadilute yung sinasabing accountability, kung bakit nadadilute yung sinasabing consultative, bakit sila representante ng tao. And yet walang conversation na nangyayari between people and the representatives. Bumoto na lang dun sa franchise. Sila. Pero did they ever feel the pulse?
Yeah.
Did they ever feel how many people in my district have lost jobs, have been deprived of information? 'Di ba? So, parang yun ang mga missing I mean, over time, nag-change yung character ng ating legislation. And I think this is where this thing poses a challenge to us as citizens and as voters. Masaya ba ako na itong representante ko ganito mag-represent, hindi ba? So I think this is the time. Citizens will have to rethink before they cast their choices.
We actually have several questions already because we kind of touched on it, yung interactions between the legislative branch of government and Malacanang or the administrative branch of government. But we'll ask that a little later. Gusto ko lang i-note na parang I think people don't realize that na legislators are supposed to consult. And in fact, that's why on Fridays, walang Fridays and Thursdays, tama ba,
Thursdays and
Carmela?
Fridays.
Thursdays din, di
Sessions
ba?
are Mondays to Wednesdays lang
Oo.
because by design, we're supposed to go
Rare-
home before
Saka
the
rare magka-hearing, kahit sa committees, rare magka-hearing. Gusto ko lang yun i-point out kasi nung una ako naging reporter ng House, hindi ko alam yon, hindi ko tinanong yon kay Carmela. So nagulat ako, pumunta ako ng Friday, walang tao sa batasang pabansa. Nagulat ako, ghost town siya. And that's because, your representatives are supposed to consult with their constituents. We kind of touched this already earlier, pero our big question today is supposed to be, how does a law become a law? But before we jump deeper into that, siguro we need to understand a little bit more the nuances and differences between the Senate and the House. I think si Ma'am Edna, she was discussing this yesterday when we were in a huddle, diba, na the Senate is very unique in the Philippines because they have a national constituency. Paano po nangyari yun? Bakit naging ganun sa atin?
Oo. Well, in a parliamentary system, ibang sistema yon, ano? In a parliamentary system like the United Kingdom, naka-merge kasi yung executive legislative. So ang diskusyon nila right there and then, nagdidiskusyon na sa parliament. I have witnessed in London, for example, how the deliberations are done. Mabilis mas merong diskusyon, merong kaagad mga ilang motion. But in our case, nakahiwalay, yung legislative natin, may sariling diskusyon, tapos ipapadaanin, and there are 2 chambers na nga, no? Pagkatapos ma-discuss sa House, o kaya simultaneous sa discussion sa Senado. So yung proseso ang tagal, ang haba, no? Magkaiba. What was the question? The question was, anong kaibahan? May focus kasi na may mga counterpart naman sila usually sa committee, no? Yung committee sa House, may counterpart siya ng similar committee sa Senado. And deliberation in the House, and then there's also concurrently deliberation in the Senate, and then they will compare and come together in what we call the bicameral. Again, this is a form of democracy as perceived. Parang ini-scrutinize ng mas matindi. But it takes time. Hindi ka agad nakaka-unite. In more cases, the longer it takes, nagda-drop off na yung issue. Wala na. Whereas in a parliament system, na mabilis, combined kasi. Mabilis yung decision. In ours, masyado tayong malayer sa processes ng democracy. Pero it's also inefficient in a way. Meron din na, ang striking sa Senado ay yung mga international laws na nire-review, na hindi na ito binibigyang halaga siguro sa House. Kasi ang House national district nila, yung local, kasi representante sila ng distrito. But in the Senate, dito talaga papasok the terrorism, the West Philippine Sea, iba pang international treaties. And in that sense, in fairness, the Senate has a larger, bigger perspective, no? Hindi masyadong parochial, kasi kailangan nilang maging mas malapad. But these two will again compare notes and consult each other. So medyo ang bagal, di ba? Nagsawa na ang lobbyists, ang advocates, iniwan na yung advocacy nila, wala pa rin nangyari sa katagalan, sa kabagalan. So I think this is where our system, it shoots us in the foot, no? Yung inefficiency. What else? Yung mga botante, ang nagluklok sa senador, the whole country votes for the Senate, right? Kaya nga halos feeling king and queen equally, like the president, ang mga senador. Because yung mandato nila is really huge.
Yes.
It's nationwide. All right? Compared to a congressman of a district or a congresswoman of a district na limitado lang ang kanilang mandate dun sa votes ng kanilang distrito. So, and the concern are really more local, more specific. I wouldn't say parochial, pero medyo gano'n na nga. Yung kanilang concerns, no? So, in that sense, ang mighty and powerful and feeling mighty talaga si Senator. Kasi imagine, minsan mas malaki ang boto niya kaysa dun sa nakuhang boto ng presidente.
Yes.
So in terms of people's voice and people's choice and democracy, pwede niyang ipagmalaki yun. No? So I think yun yung isa kung bakit napaka-brave, mapanuri lalo ang Senado. Di ba?
I think also, yung Senate and the House, the differences, in my observation, are defined by their constituencies, by the very fact that senators are elected nationwide and representatives, district and party list representatives are elected nationwide. Yung district representatives are elected in the provinces. So so their interests, when we would hear congressional hearings of the same topic, no? Kahit na itong government spending on the pandemic, very different ang question sa House at very different sa question sa Senate, because when representatives ask questions, they're always thinking of their constituents. Yes. So their questions emanate from that. Will this also, when they talk about infrastructure, for example, the question for a senator's mind probably is, fair ba yung distribution ng money for infrastructure and capital outlay? But different ang question sa utak ng isang congressman who would think, may proyekto ba sa distrito ko? So that by nature makes them different, and that's why Senate then by design is looking at the international treaties, broader perspective siya in that sense. So I think it balances. Kung maganda sana yung performance ng both chambers, they should balance each other, local and national interests.
I think that's one of the more interesting things when you're covering the House, no? Kasi like not without meaning to use parochial in a negative manner, but it's an interesting way to see kung ano yung concerns ng mga distrito, ng mga cities,
and I will not take
province.
it against a district representative who will do everything to get his projects funded in his district. That's one thing you have to understand in the House of Representatives. Siguro iba yung appreciation natin from the outside na puro na lang distrito niya yung pinupondohan niya, but of course that's his job. Pero as the representative.
That's his job, di ba?
Yes.
So I will look at what my district needs. At I think this is one reason also kung bakit kailangan mabait din siya sa executive. Kasi ang nagko-consolidate ng budget sa mga infrastructure, ikino-consolidate ito ng executive, no? And then it's put forward for the deliberation of Congress.
That has always been the power of the executive over the legislative. While legislative has the power of the purse, yung disbursement, yung saro, nasa executive.
Nasa executive. That's why magkakonekta ito eh. And that's why I will be understanding kung bakit ganon ang, ano bang tawag doon? To a certain extent, sinusuyo din ng district representatives yung executive. And that's why mas romantically linked sila sa isa't isa kesa nakalink yung Senado doon sa executive. I mean, that nothing wrong with it. In fact, if I am a congressperson, I have to fight for my district.
Yeah.
Diba?
Yeah.
By the next election, doon din ako susukatin ng aking mga district mates. So I mean, you have to produce something. So we don't look at it as sa akin yung logic, 'di ba? What will I bring home? What bacon did I take home to my district? That's very normal. That's part also of how did I represent my district, which is quite fair. I mean, oo naman. Diba?
May tanong naman ako dyan mamaya sa flip side naman when your representation doesn't feel represented. But before that, I want to ask a question from Paulo Miguel Ordonio. He asked this question via Zoom based on the democracy status now. So I guess the state of democracy in the Philippines. Is there a way po ba na ma-amend ang constitution regarding qualifications of the members of the legislative department, like inclusion of relevant educational background and work experience? Siri, let's start with, do you even agree with that notion na kailangan may minimum requirement to be a congressman, to be a set educational requirement? Sorry, meron na kasing minimum requirement. Pero agree ba kayo dun sa concept na kailangan may minimum educational attainment, or kung baga may quota ka sa resume para you can even be considered to join Philippine Congress? Nagre-react na si Dr. Ko. What's your take on that, ma'am?
Remember, ito nga yung political nature ng Kongreso. Political yan kasi nire-representa niya yung kanyang mga mamamayan doon sa distrito. Isn't that a bit middle class and elitist to say, ito lang yung qualifications na pwede doon sa mga kinatawan, but how can someone not feel one with the constituents? No, we deprive them of that kind of representation, which in our enshrined sa ating constitution at sa konsepto natin ng Philippine democracy, everyone has an equal right to representation. Nag-aral ka man, nag-college degree ka man o hindi, you have the right to be heard, to be represented in the halls of Congress. Ngayon, paano natin ma-eliminate pag nag-set tayo ng mataas na standard? Pero kung may integridad ang isang magsasaka, di ba? Hindi nakakapag-English, meron naman siyang technical assistance. Pero ano yung nasa puso niya at ano ang kanyang kinakatawan, that is being respected by our system. No one will be deprived of that representation. Pero mayroon tayong inuwian na isa na napaka-problematic na, no? Yung party list. But that's another session siguro.
Parang medyo po yun, marugdob na usapan po yun kung party list na. I think we should reserve another session for that specifically.
I think the point I'm making is the essence of democracy, which we want upheld, is really representation. That no single class or no single sector will have a dominance of that representation by virtue of what? Educational attainment. Tayo sa Pinas, ang hilig nating husgahan ang isang tao through the educational attainment, di ba? Pero this is a political representation. Hindi ito nag-a-apply ng trabaho para maging isang profesor sa UP. Hindi ganon eh. Dinadala ko yung adhikain at yung boses ng aking nire-represent na mga tao. And that is regardless kung yung representante mo is unschooled, di ba? Or highly trained. So, I mean, ano yan? In fairness, that's how the spirit of democracy. Kaya napaka-minimum ng requirements. Minimum lang. Huwag mo nang hanapan ng mas matitindi. Eh kung tayo nga, hirap tayong mag-apply ng job sa ano, di ba? Pero, I mean, how much more? Those who we are supposed to represent. It's the political representation.
Carmela?
It is not an academic representation by profession.
At saka mahirap din yan when you put into law or into something written down all of these requirements for candidates, no? Because it can limit the freedom of the electorate to choose who they want to lead them. At the end of the day, huwag tayong umasa sa mga written requirements for particular leaders. Let's trust sana the electorate, and I guess this is where I bring the conversation to voter information. At the end of the day, it's the maturity of the voter to know who will lead them best or who will lead us best. The decision is up to us. So doon, I think, ang focus ng, if there's something we should realize by now, it's not all of these requirements written down on paper. It's the maturity of the voters to choose. Nakikita mo na nga ganito yung state of affairs ng country, no? But we keep electing the same people, for example. Seems we're not learning the lessons.
Yeah.
Yung
At
point
saka
niya
yung
kanina. Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
Pwede naman punuan yun eh. And I think that's one role that the College of Public Administration tried to fill in, no? Pag nanalo ka na, pwede ka namang matrain. Ano ba ang mga basic, no?
Hinahabol na lang yung capabilities.
Hahabulin mo yung ano, but even the school, it's not easy to understand the ways, the procedures, the rules of Congress, di ba? Magte-train ka pa rin. Pero yung iba, ang importante, kaya niyang makita kung ano yung importante sa kanyang role as a legislator. Meron naman siyang staff, may technical people who can assist at mapunuan yung kakulangan. Pero andyan ba yung kanyang aspiration that is shared with those who put him there or her there? So I think meron tayong ganon, but meron namang minimum requirements as I said, but don't put it, at saka kung ano nga ang nakita natin sa contemporary history, yung pinakamatalino, yun yung nagdala sa atin ng napakalaking problema rin, hindi ba? I mean, it's not the degree that, it's not only that. It's about public service, accountability, what one stands for, di ba? Narratives ng leadership.
Meron tayong comment mula kay Janet de la Cruz. Pinahirapan mo naman ako, Janet. Hindi ako magaling mag-Tagalog. Pero ito-try natin. Napakaganda ng concept ng democracy. Umiiwas tayo sa elitist na representation, pero sa totoong buhay, hindi naman talaga nabibigyan ng boses ang mga mamamayan. Wala akong natatandaan na ang representatives namin ay bumaba sa luklukan ng kapangyarihan para marinig ang sentiments ng kanyang nasasakupan. Siguro I want to connect this then to our next question din, di ba? Na parang, why is it then that, like as Janet says, like us normal citizens, we don't always feel that we're heard in Congress. Bakit naman po ganun? And siguro to take a step further, what can we do? What can we do about that? How can we make sure that doesn't happen again, or it doesn't happen, or we put a stop to that come 2022?
You're asking me, Carmela, or what?
Well, I guess what's your take on that? Na bakit nga ba hindi, I guess na-discuss natin in passing kanina, di ba, na parang it's not just the constituency. They also have their internal politics to worry about. That's why sometimes they may vote according to party lines.
Pero ang ano ko din, no, like sa Pilipinas, pagkatapos ng napaka-festive na election, napakasaya ng election natin, di ba? Everybody makes money of it. Ang saya, masayang-masaya. But after election, naputol na rin yung connection kasi ng mamamayan at saka yung representative na ibinoto niya. And that's a big problem. Because we shouldn't lose the connection between those who represent us and those who are represented. No? Kaya nga, we should keep on talking politics. We should keep on demanding, no? The citizens are really the power base. Dapat nagre-report yung representative. Dapat pag hindi nagre-report yung mga tao, puntahan sila, tanungin, magkonsulta, di ba? Pero hindi rin naman na to beg for medical assistance pagkatapos nun wala na ulit conversation, di ba? In other words, this is a continuum, citizenship at saka yung proper political representation. These are two things which are in a continuum. We develop the kind of leaders that we have as voters. Pero yun ding binoto natin, pag wala namang nagbabantay sa akin, pag wala namang nagtatanong, I'll go my own way, di ba? And therefore, there should always be, after election, eto na we should be watchful, we should raise question, we should be vigilant as citizens na nakikipag-ugnayan sa representante. Doon sa binoto.
Follow through
Yes.
po, ma'am.
They say nga democracy is an action word, diba? It's a participatory process. Yes, we can take all our time, criticizing our representatives, and they we know their faults also. They lack in consulting the public. They don't always represent the constituents. But let's also look at our roles as citizens in a democratic country na it works both ways. So we also need to exercise our power as citizens. So we have to take our politicians to account. When we ask bakit elitist ang ating democracy, bakit hindi tayo nirepresenta ng mga politicians natin? So now that we know that, what can we do, diba? And I think I'd like to mention here the power of social media. Let's not forget, when in the past we can only engage with our politicians come campaign time, no, and they come to our barangays, shake our hands, ask for our votes. Now we can actually reach out to them through, we can organize our communities, we can even question the votes of our representatives if we think they're not voting for their constituents, no. Marami tayong pwedeng gawin. So I think ito yung dapat nating i-develop as active citizenry, no, in a democratic country. So marami tayong pwedeng gawin. Social media pa lang, I know a lot of you are very active on social media. You can tag your representatives, senators about their votes, about their actions. I think they read all of these posts, they read these comments, and if you are able to organize your communities, that's a louder voice.
Curious ako. Yung congressmen, mostly congressmen kasi again, the senators have a national mandate. Yung congressmen ba natin, sanay sila sa ganon na interaction with their constituents, na kinakatok parati ng voters sila na, oy sir, ma'am, hindi po yan yung gusto kong boto, or hindi yan yung values ko, hindi yan yung leanings ko. Sanay ba sila doon, or is that actually a radical, like what we're discussing now, would that be radical to them na, oh wait, my constituents are pressuring me to
traditionally
change my vote?
kasi, no, ang kausap nila barangay captains, and that yun yung lumang kalakaran, diba? That's the power structure before. So when they want to reach out to a particular community, they reach out to barangay captains. But we've also seen, for example, during the vote on the franchise of ABS-CBN, ang daming nangalampag, diba, sa social media. And we actually found the lawmakers having to explain their votes because they know that their constituents are listening. They're listening to the explanation of the votes, diba? So this is an example, I think, that we can learn from. That, if we speak out, they're forced to listen, diba? But if we keep silent and we just complain on the side, nothing will change.
Siguro yung connection between those who were voted for and the citizens are more evident at the local level. Mas kaya kasi yung by number, by proximity to people, madali posible. Pero pag the higher you go, like Congress, medyo ang hirap na, no? Kasi that involves more towns and cities, etc. and more people. But this is where media could come in. I have seen also, for example, in the United Kingdom where gulat ako, pagising mo sa umaga, you turn on the radio, you get all the local news, and the MP, the member of parliament, no, tawag nila MP, the member of parliament is guesting at a local radio station and talking about what bills were discussed in the House of Commons. So sabi ko, at saka ang mga tao, they were tuned in, they were listening, and they were making comments, and they were making conversations. So there is an exchange, in other words, no, na importante. It's not, life is there only one election after another election. But in between is the most important. Ano yung ginagawa mo after having been voted upon? And the conversation cannot, the blame cannot be put only on congressmen, cannot be put only on those who were voted upon. Kailangan dalawa di ba? Kaya nga ito yan, yung and even in the academy, marami tayong estudyante at saka nasa university. Democracy is not just voting. It's about the day-to-day life of citizens taking part and conversing with political players. No, I think yun yung missing doon sa ating concept ng demokrasya. Demokrasya natin is election day and that's it. But demokrasya is every day. Nakaka-stress, ano? Imagine every day yung mga citizens kailangan nalalaman nila, ba't ganito yung aming baha? Bakit ganito yung kalye namin? Yung infrastructure, ba kailan matatapos? And I think here I will cite example, homeowners association in some middle income sections of our areas. Naku-question nila yan kasi kapitbahay nila si congressman, no? Pero yung mga iba pa na mas distant, there should be medium and I think our young executives, young mayors, may taga ano ba rito, I won't name places ang galing nagko-conversation, di ba? Maybe, I don't pray for it, but the pandemic is one occasion where we see mayor in dirty shirts going around the streets, making sure that the services are there. People are connected to the politicians. So I think, it cuts both ways. Yung demokrasya, hindi lang kay congressman at kay senator. Yung demokrasya is about all of us. And hello, May 2022 is our day. It's not their day. It's our day. Diba?
Tama. Dapat tayo yung bida.
Tayo ang bida. Hindi si congressman. Tayo ang bida. Babalikan ko anong ginawa nito sa media na sinara. Ano ba ang naging position niya on the bayanihan? Ano ba ang... In other words, it's a day of reckoning for citizens to make the decision.
And it's good to start conversation. So maybe as voters, we can review ano ba yung boto ni congressman over the last 3 years, no? And we should decide or paano niya ginastos yung funds that was allocated to the district. And let's not stop there. Let's not just educate ourselves, no? Let's have conversations, sabi nga ni Dr. Ako. Let's have conversations with our friends, with our families about it. And who knows, this is how we build a nation, diba? When we begin to be actively involved in the decision-making processes. And we get involved by, actively choosing for the best leader to lead us.
Parang paulit-ulit natin to na point in previous iterations of this dialogue, no, na parang it's ironic because this is held online, this is via Zoom, and this is broadcast via Facebook and YouTube. Pero sa mga nanonood, what our hope is also is that you bring this offline. Tulad nga nung nabanggit ni Dr. Ko at ni Carmela, yun nga, parang makipag-usap kayo sa kapitbahay niyo, presuming hindi kayo nagbe-break ng quarantine protocols, no? Makipag-usap kayo sa parents nyo, sa kapatid nyo, sa kasambahay nyo, sa neighbor nyo, kahit sa mga kaibigan nyo, sa mga group chat nyo, di ba? Parang, kung tapos na kayo mag-usap tungkol sa chismis, parang normalize, kumbaga din, discussing not just like the hot topic issues, but yun nga, ito nga yung parang like, politics in its truest sense, right? Like, magtanong-tanong kayo, yung rep nyo ba, unang sa lahat, kilala nyo ba sino yung rep nyo? Ano yung voting record ng rep nyo? Kung hindi kayo masaya, edi, ito na yung sign na you have to do something about it on election day in 2022. I want to pull out some questions here from Zoom. Actually, we're gonna talk about this na rin naman, pero we have a question from Berlin de la Cruz, kasi our next topic is actually about yun nga. Parang we talked about how the House and the Senate, the House and the Senate, they balance out, diba, a more national view of the world because they have a national constituency, and then the finer details of Philippine government, kumbaga, the concerns ng mga cities and mga provinces. And then ideally, the three branches of government balance each other out, call each other out, and check and balances dapat, diba? Pero ito nga, parang that's all given on paper, diba? But you know, like in the House, it's a super majority, right? Hindi lang majority, super majority. So how do we make sure that, let's start with the House, like the House maintains kahit paano its independence and it doesn't become a rubber stamp Congress?
Maybe I'll start. No, when that was, I was thinking of two ways, no, na hindi maging independent ang legislative chamber. One is if the executive respects the independence of the legislative chamber. If hindi siya masyadong nakikialam, doesn't dictate on them. That's one. And two is if we change the membership of these chambers. We it's the same names we see elected. It's the same problem we see every Congress. So if we're that's the only solution I can find, aside from, you know, having a president who will respect independence, for the electorate to elect independent members of Congress. Otherwise, if it's the same people, we'll see the same loyalties.
So see, guys, it's interconnected. If you want a Congress, a House that functions the way it should function, you have to choose the right president. Ma'am Edna?
What do I say to that? In addition to what Carmela said, meron kasing I cannot disagree. I support the point raised. Pero medyo may point na dumadaan dun sa it's the same people. Again, it's a people's choice.
Exactly. No.
Inoto natin yun di ba?
That's why we get the same politics. It's the same. People are not learning. So I think bottom line is really voter information again. No, we have to understand what is at stake. So if we're not even interested in understanding that things are not changing because the same people are there, then we'll be facing the same issues.
Yeah, but I don't mind having the same people voted in the next election kung mahusay yung kanyang ginawa. Di ba? By law, by our law, may limit yung term, right? And if it is following the law, you can be voted upon 3 times maximum. If you're in Congress, pwede naman. So I will have to review, for example, as a voter, ano bang ginawa nito? And it doesn't mean every election time you change. Kasi kung hindi naman, kung maganda ang kanyang track record, at the end of the day, performance. What did we do? What did he or she do for the constituents? Then fine. Give the blessing, the mandate, the vote. Right? But then again, it is a sacred thing Well, hindi natin pwedeng sabihin, pareho ang pilyedo mo, ipagbawal. Kasi remember that democracy is about the right to vote and the right to be voted. The right to be voted. How do we put a limit to it? Medyo meron ako, I'm a bit sanguine on the dynasty. I know it can be horrifying if there is a perpetuation forever and ever, no? Lalo na kung aba teka, nasa constitution na nga, aba pinagbabawal na nga, bakit pa, di ba? I think it should be within the bounds of the law, the constitution, but then at the end of the day, performance, review it, and kung mahusay, then go ahead. I mean, but if it's democracy at the heart yun yung aking tingin, ano? Kahit na sino, porke ba pareho ako ng apelyido, meron bang wala ba akong karapatan na tumakbo, no? In other words, democracy is the right to vote and to be voted upon. Pero again, we say, ano yung performance, ano yung character, and what will be the implication on representation and on our democracy? Wala na bang iba dyan? Wala ba talagang iba? Diba? I mean, and this is exactly what we are supposed to do during campaign period. Isipin natin mabuti. No? And hindi kasi, I don't believe yung minamana yung position. If we allow it as voters, oo, then it will be parang hinahand over lang, no? Pero kasi ang challenge ko is, but on election day, why did you vote for that person kung hindi pala mahusay? Diba? So it goes back to the citizen again.
Balik nga sa mga
of
viewers
democracy
natin.
naman always relies on the informed electorate, no? So the decision whether or not to elect or remove politicians in office lies on us. So sana informed yung indecision na yon, no? Hindi dahil wala nang ibang
Yun lang yung
option.
alam. Oo, tama.
Yun lang ang alam. Sana ganun sana participatory talaga. So I think that we can change our politics if we change ourselves now as voters. We should be more active in choosing right leaders for us. And sa atin, no, na I think a lot of us in this conversation, I would assume aware tayo what we would want our politics to be. Siguro ang challenge sa atin is really to reach out to our neighbors, to our friends. Kasi I'm sure most of you, all of you, want better governance, good governance, better politics for the Philippines, no? But the challenge is, how do we get that majority? How do we get the super majority on our side, no? Mm-hmm. So we get good laws, so we get good politicians. So we should reach out. Yun ang ating challenge talaga.
Yung ano nga doon, parang if you feel frustrated, if you're angry with how our congressmen or senators are voting, parang you have to convert that frustration and anger into action, whether it be creating an organization to push for education in your community, whether it be but again, I emphasize the importance of moving offline also, kasi parang online kasi okay naman okay na yung voices online, but we will have to remember that much more people are not online. I want to pull out this question from Ed Jose. What resources or tools are available for an ordinary citizen to be able to check the performance of our elected officials? Mag-answer na ako from the Raptor perspective. There are stories that come out whenever votes happen. Problema lang doon kung tama ba yung pronunciation ko? Viva voce. Kung yun yung vote, mahirap itali kasi literally sumisigaw lang sila doon sa plenary. So it's hard to manually tally and be sure na that rep voted for this, in favor of this or whatever. Pero may official tally naman yun. Pero siguro baka may alam din po kayong resources that they can actually track the voting record of the representatives. Pero yung easy answer dun ay abangan mo yung rep mo. Make sure na kung may malaking contentious issue, tignan mo kung paano siya pumoto, paano siya nag-debate ba siya in the first place, or wala siyang pakialam sa issue na yun. Carmela or Ma'am Edna?
Siguro quickly lang, sa kampanya, it would be good to listen to all of your candidates, all the candidates in your districts, no? Kasi syempre, one candidate will promote himself lang, and the other candidate will probably just criticize the other. I think let's take the time to listen to them, weigh on their perspectives. Kasi para mas makuha natin yung complete record siguro ng mga kandidato, no? Because the best siguro na investigation on a candidate ay manggagaling sa kalaban, di ba? And the best na promotion for a candidate manggagaling sa camp niya. We will expect that on their social media pages na when we look at the pages of the candidate, syempre lahat maganda sa page niya, di ba? But let's see what they will say about each other also. I think that will be a good indication. And hopefully it will be a good debate between the candidates. Kung may kalaban, alam ko maraming mga distrito wala na rin talagang kalaban. But that's one way of trying to locally, that's one way of looking into the records of candidates. Pakinggan sino yung sumusuporta, sino yung hindi. Because they will have perspectives on the candidates.
Yeah. I
Okay, so
fully
we were-
agree.
Ay, yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
Yeah, of course. Go ahead.
Okay, kasi we discussed kanina, diba, the difference of one of the reasons why the Senate is perceived or is more independent or mas kaya niya maging combative kunwari towards the administration is because it's the mandate is national. But we have a question from Berlin de la Cruz, specifically asking about the relationship of Senator Go and the president. I think tinanong niya to dahil din sa recent na speech ni Senator Bongo, di ba, na expressing his closeness to the president. How does this affect, pero yung question niya medyo zoom out, how does this affect lawmaking independence in both departments? When you have a senator who not just is very overt about his loyalty to the president, how does this affect the institution? Anyone who wants to go first?
I think that should be that's really a bit disturbing when, for example, from the Senate, one spends almost more than a big amount of time really attending presidential meetings and attending to more executive. Parang naka-aid talaga siya on the executive, and that really raises some question on then how much is it that is spent on being a senator, performing functions of a senator. But not only that, are we able to have a space, or is one able to have a space for some middle ground independent sensing, or is it just may alter ego kaagad yung executive dun sa Senado? So I think this is a question that I'd rather raise. I have no easy answers, but the questions is something that these are questions which probably our fellow men should start thinking about. Na tama ba ito? Tama ba ganito ang behavior at saka yung action ng isang senador?
Hindi naman, go ahead,
Akin,
Doctor.
yung nakaupo lang doon na hindi nagsasalita sa Senado, I think that's very, I don't know, unsenatoriable na
sayang yung post.
Sayang, oo. But of course, again, ano ba yung kanyang main agenda at paano siya nag-deliver according to that agenda is something to review by the voters this time prior to the election. Baka naman merong ginawa, hindi natin alam kasi nga hindi nagsasalita. But it's something to scrutinize during this period, no? And get data. Yan, malaki ang role talaga ng ng media, ng observers ng public offices. Let's put them in the open for our citizens to realize who's performing and who is not. I mean, in the spirit of deliberative decision prior to an election.
Wala namang ding masama kung ang isang senador ay sinusuportahan yung isang pangulo, no? Pero sana it's a matter of principle, and there's that objectivity na the support is based on policies. Pero sabi nga ni Doktora ko, parang alter ego na kasi yung role na nakikita natin sa Senado. So that raises questions talaga. Kasi nga, again, co-equal nga dapat ang Senado, di ba? But you have instead an alter ego.
Yeah.
in the chain.
Mahirap check and balances kung checks and balance kung
Parang that cannot be expected anymore, no? Kung ganon. And he says so himself.
Yeah.
And ito, ang tingin ko yung burden ang laki sa bahagi ng voters. Imagine you'll have to dig into paano ba ang performance niya, di ba? And this is where media, those who have access to information, will be able to really bring out the information, no? Yung putting it out like and groups, young people creating Viber, so that there is a flow of ideas and information. Lumalapad yung pag-share ng mga data. Fact-checking is important. Gathering information about people who we want to consider to be voted. No, it's important. These are preparations for citizens to do. More than the candidates, I'd look at election as a matter of citizenship rather than a matter of politics and politician. Mamulitika sila pag nakaupo. Pero pag malapit na ang election, it is really citizens.
Right. I think this question is more for Carmela, talking about engagement. This is a question from Carlos Benedict Neri. What are your tips and suggestions for campus journalists and publications in effectively raising awareness and covering the branches of the government, especially in the upcoming 2022 elections? Siguro yung context nito, unlike, let's say, like PCIJ or Rappler, like may access naman tayo part tayo nung media environment na yun that covers the Senate and House. Pero paano naman for campus journalism? Do you have tips for our young journalists?
For campus journalists, you're very well placed, no, to scrutinize, be it district representatives or national candidates, because what you have to think of is your constituency, kumbaga. May sarili kayong audience. And I think it will be helpful in terms of engaging your audiences is to know what they're interested in. So for example, you're a campus in or you're in Caloocan. There are various issues in Caloocan City, no, that your readers will be interested in. Be it poverty ba, or the ABS-CBN franchise, maybe war on drugs. This is how you can engage your readership na pare-pareho lang din naman tayo ng iniisip, no? Who reads us? So who reads you? As campus journalists, who reads you? Who reads Rappler? Who reads PCIJ? And what are they interested in? So we will continue to write about these issues, and in your case, the local issues your readers are interested in. So you can continue to engage them. This is how you make them interested in the elections, in local politics, by highlighting to them why it matters to them. Na yun nga, kailangan nyo ring pag-aralan. Ano nga yung mga issues na malapit sa puso ng communities ninyo. And that's how we all play our part. Very important actually, no, yung mga campus journalists, yung community press, because you can help educate an entire community. Kasi mas alam nyo, kaysa sa amin, kunyari, na we are not on the ground, no, mas alam nyo kung ano yung interests ng mga botante sa lugar nyo. And you'll be in a better position to help them decide. So if in Caloocan, ang laki ng, di ba, yung pinakamalaking voting precinct is in Caloocan. Caloocan has a very big population. So if you can start in your communities, that's a great contribution to yung sinasabi niya namin ni Dr. Ko na participative democracy, no, na sana involved tayo sa demokrasya. Hindi lang election day, but this is a continuing process, no, that we hope we can continue to do even beyond elections, to continue scrutinizing the leaders we elect para alam nila na nakikinig tayo, that we are paying attention. I think that's what's really important. They should be made aware that the voters are paying attention, and that we will all decide come election day.
Ano rin yun, no? Parang when you think of media, don't just think of like media like PCIJ, Rappler, yung mainstream media. Diba, campus journalists, community journalists, like if you're unfortunate enough that your representative doesn't listen, you can help amplify those voices para mapilitan siyang makinig. Di ba? Wala nang choice yung rep niyo kundi makinig kasi you have these groups, these institutions amplifying it. Kay Dr. ko, siguro i-extend natin yung tanong kanina kasi campus journalist yung tanong, di ba? How about for the younger voters? Kasi you mentioned yesterday also, di ba, the potential power of the youth vote. We actually discussed this in the first iteration of this dialogue. So how can they perhaps help and contribute in a more concrete manner siguro sa pinag-usapan nga natin na like yung genuine engagement in politics beyond electoral politics lang and beyond election day?
We're in the university, we're working with a group of young people. They call themselves Sustainable Development Goals Youth Force Philippines. These are young professionals. These are people, up to age 30, mga ano na sila, they're working in different fields. But there are 2,000 of them, more than 2,000 all over the country. And they're asking the hard question. They pick on particular set of places or particular politicians, and they ask the question, anong agenda nyo for the next, if you are planning to run, paano nyo mapoprotektahan ang using the metrics of Sustainable Development Goals? Ano ba yung Sustainable Development Goals? No poverty, zero hunger, gender equality, a climate crisis, no? Industry. Ano yung agenda nyo na nag-a-align dito sa Sustainable Development Goals? This agenda has been crafted by these young people. And sila mismo, kino-compare nila yung information. Candidate A has this, candidate B has this, candidate C has this, and then show it to the public and say which one do you think will be able to bring us given the agenda. So it's a way to help voters prepare who is the candidate who is able to draw up something, a vision using benchmarking with Sustainable Development Goals. No? Medyo ano siya, ibang klase kasi parang, pero that's translatable at the very grassroots. Kasi tinatanong, anong agenda nito? And it's shared with voters. First of all, among young voting population. And they have come to to something like an alliance among themselves. No? So in other words, kung ano yung kaya nyong gawin, ano yung skills nyo, ano yung ideas ng young people, use it by all means to measure, to inform others na ito yung klase ng kandidato na meron tayo at ano yung gagawin nila para sa bayan. I think it's in a way answering the question, what potential leaders do you have there for 2022? Pero yung isa din na I was trying to tell young people, yung tanong din is, what does this country need? No, hindi lang anong klaseng leaders ang gusto natin. Ano yung kailangan ng bansa? Needs meaning at this time of the pandemic, yung magtutugon sa health and safety, sa jobs, sa magki-create ng employment. These are the things. Sinong kandidato ang makakapagpakita na merong efforts in the past sa kanilang mga ipinasan na bills, na laws, at saka yung actual na ginagawa nila, na sinusupport nila. So I think it's letting the idealism at saka yung ground reality meet up. And the youth is very creative. They're so creative and imaginative and powerful to connect this. Minsan kasi parang gusto natin, may mga negative yung older people no? Politics is the same. Pero yung young people, meron sila nung challenging, optimism na challenging. Pero sila din kasi ngayon at this time, lalo na ang election, parang half digitized, half physical, we're careful. Sila yung bridge, sila yung connector because they have the ability to engage digitally and
I
reach
think
out.
parang ang gandang
Yeah.
project nun for helping those who don't even know where to start because it can be intimidating kung hindi ka that engaged in the first place para ma-pinpoint kung ano ba yung values talaga that and issues that matter to you. So we'll try to link a resource to that or maybe in the story page for this discussion if people want to explore it further. We're down to our last question, but I just want to mention the people who ang dami nagtanong actually sa Zoom pa lang. So we have questions from Arian, Devon, Uriel, Berlin. I asked one question earlier. Marge. We have a question from Asher, Ed, asked kanina, Jeff, Adrian, Anton. We saw your questions. We unfortunately have run out of time, but if you have questions, we'll give the email siguro of Carmela or Dr. Ko if you want to ask further. But we're down to our last question. Siguro nga, given everything that we discussed today, diba, the enormous power of our representatives, both in the Senate and in the House. Like, siguro 2 questions. Una, parang ano ba yung kailangan nilang tignan at kailangan nilang isipin kung boboto na nga sila, kung di naman kailangan punuin, pero kung tinitignan nila kung sinong isasama nila sa list of 12 senators they'll be voting for, the reps they'll be voting for, and then second to that, and I'll repeat this question later, how do we make sure nga that after we cast that vote, we make sure that the person we elected actually represents our interest? Whoever wants to go first dun sa pagpili ng tamang legislator.
I'll start briefly. I think it's important, again, yung key naman na role ng lawmakers is lawmaking. And we have to understand how the role they play in governing our lives. Again, they decide what types of services we have access to, how much money goes to what particular government project. For example, if you have advocacies, or there's something you want to believe, you really believe in, whether there's a law that you want passed, I think the senators naman announce or publish their stand on issues, and they're asked that during the campaign. So remember, when you vote for senators, think of their positions on issues and do you agree with them? Because when they're elected, they will vote according to, they will vote on these very big issues. So kung alam mong ang isang particular senador na to ay kahit gusto mo siya but he opposes an issue that is very close to your heart, that's something you have to think about. Or syempre marami pang ibang aspects, there's a lot of roles that senators can play in the legislative chamber, but that's one way of deciding who to vote for. You have to scrutinize ano yung position nila sa important issues that we're facing in the country, and there are many, so it's important that we have leaders who will decide for the good of the country. So that's one way. I think usually naman tuwing elections may mga very big issues na yan na mag-gravitate tayo around. We will anticipate mga big decisions, big proposals of laws na ita-tackle in the next Congress. So that's one thing we should research on and think about and see sino yung mga senators who support our own beliefs. So that's one way of choosing senators to elect.
Dr. Ko?
I agree with what Carmela said. From the point of view of citizens, ano ba yung kinakailangan natin from where we are at the moment, where we are, where do we want to head the country to? Saan tayo pupulutin, di ba? From the pandemic, from the unemployment, massive unemployment, the joblessness, saan ito? Ano pa yung at the level of the district, there can be smaller issues that pertain to a particular district, province, or whatever territory it is. I think kayo yung maglilist nung gagawa ng checklist, and you say, how did this person who has been there perform? Can that person contribute to taking us there? Di ba? Anong naging position niya dito sa mga usapin na ito ng mga tao? And sila lang ba, or can there be emergent leaders that communities can probably want to consider and to develop? Actually, yung sinasabi rin, mahirap kasi pag tumakbo ka, kailangan ng maraming pera. But I think
Totoo rin, Dr. ko.
but begin from the district. Meron din naman na dinala ng boto dahil malinaw sa tao kung ano ang sinisimbolo niya. 'Di ba? Sa akin, varied yung politicians. Merong moneyed, meron din namang hindi. So I think there is a chance. Hindi naman tayo doomed completely, no? I think andun yon. But for as long as we do our work as parang thoughtful citizens, tanungin natin yan. And let's influence each other. Mag-Viber, mag-create ng group conversation, mag-create ng and show to people that we are in search of a leader who will respond to what the country needs. Whether country as a whole, kasi kung senador yan, o presidente yan, di ba? At kung sa ating distrito, what our district needs, nasa particular area nyo yan. So I think, at the end of the day, I'd like to reverse the question na hindi ang tanong ay, what leaders do we need? Gusto kong baliktarin, ano ang kailangan ko bilang mamamayan? Anong kailangan natin bilang mamamayan? And we have to look at it from there and match sino yung gumagalaw ayon dito sa issues na kailangan ng tao.
Thank you, Carmela. Thank you, Dr. Ko.
Thank
For
you,
those
Rhea.
asking about the president, before I actually discussed that during the last dialogue under PH Vote Dialogue, so you can watch that. Meron ding mga mahalagang insights din yung mga guests natin from that session. Salamat sa mga nanood sa Zoom, sa different Facebook accounts that this is streaming from. Thank you for sending in your questions. Again, thank you, Dr. Edna. Thank you, Carmela, for your time, for your insights. Kahit ako, ang dami kong natutunan. Considering that I also covered the house once upon a time. So guys, today is September 1. Palapit na ng palapit ang May 9, 2022. And you have until the end of the month, that's September 30, to register to vote for the first time, to update your records, or to reactivate your voting record. But I have some reminders from our friends, your friends, hindi pala your friends lang. Part pala ako nun. From Rappler, MovePH, Rappler Civic Engagement arm also invites you to participate in the elections beyond voting. And here's how. 1, you can help fact-check claims on social media during the elections and help debunk misleading information before they can shape public opinion. Cover the elections by highlighting issues in your community and get training to be a citizen journalist who will be reporting election-related issues and initiatives in your communities. You can also lead a movement in your community and help ramp up voter registration efforts before September 30, 2021, as well as help increase voter turnout in May 2022. For more information, you can visit the URL that's being flashed on screen right now. It's rplr.co/phvotechallenge. Again, rplr.co/phvotechallenge. To have coverage in key areas around the country. You can help us reach this goal by joining Rappler Plus. Visit rappler.com/plus. We're still in the middle of a pandemic. The surge is real. So as soon as you're qualified and able, get vaccinated against COVID-19. If the quarantine restrictions in your area allow it, go out and make sure you're registered to vote. And on that note, it is already September. It means we're on the last month of voter registration. The PH Vote Coalition is leading a petition amplifying the call to extend voter registration and to make this an essential activity during the pandemic. Over 40 organizations so far have joined the call for groups take a stand with the PH Vote Coalition by signing the petition to extend voter registration. Tandaan natin, ikaw This is our decision. This has been Bea Cupin. Good night, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Bye.
Thank you, Rappler. Great job.
Thank you, Dr. Ed. Thank you, Carm. Ang dami ko natutunan. Ay, live pa pala tayo, pero okay lang yan. Ang dami ko natutunan.